noticing people that I knew on Twitter talking about protests somewhere around the 20th of December. I had traveled on business before in Tunisia. I'd gotten to know a handful of bloggers there, but as it turns out, that handful was just enough people for me to get a start into the community, because I could see who they were replying to, who they were retweeting, what hashtags they were using. So after 3 or 4 days of watching it, I started to understand that this little protest that started in the middle of nowhere in Tunisia was causing other protests to form around the country. And as I kept following it and tweeting about it and talking about it, and others started doing the same, next thing you know, there were hundreds of thousands of people marching in the streets, and they were using Twitter to tell people where to avoid certain intersections because there were snipers' nests there.
And then, of course, later in January, inspired in part by the revolt in Tunisia, hundreds of thousands of people took to the streets in Cairo. So tell us, how did you curate the conversation? Like, how did you go about that process?
I have mixed feelings about the word curation. On the one hand, I love it when it's applied to librarians and others who have historically done curation. And there certainly is an element of curation taking place in what I'm doing. I'm taking tweets from various people who are on the scene and trying to create a story or a narrative based on all of their points of view. In some ways, it's more of a form of oral history telling rather than news, because these are people saying, you know, I just threw a Molotov cocktail, I think I hit the bastard. You know, these are observations of people who are caught in the thick of it. And so I don't know if curation is the best way of describing it. On top of that, I spend a lot of time interacting with people on Twitter to help me figure things out. So for example, when the first videos started coming out of Libya in late February, there were no Western reporters there. We had no one on the ground. And people weren't necessarily sure these were accurate videos. But I would take the links to the videos and post them online, or just share them through Twitter, and people would say, oh, that's definitely a Libyan accent. I've lived in Tunisia all my life, and I could recognize it immediately. And then someone else would pop up and say, I recognize that location. It's the city of Tobruk in the east. And then others would say, no, that's not Tobruk, that's Benghazi, because Benghazi has, along the Corniche, there's that statue there. And so just by sharing it among my Twitter followers, they would begin to debate amongst each other and cross-reference the knowledge and the information they had themselves. And we didn't always figure out the exact context of what was going on. We could often rule out a lot of things that otherwise would have possibly prevented other news organizations from wanting to touch that content.
Now, how do you decide who to follow? And how do you find the best sources to follow so that you can then share that information?
You know, it varies. With Tunisia and Egypt, because I had met a number of bloggers and activists from both countries beforehand and had already been following them on Twitter, it wasn't too hard because I simply had to take a look at their Twitter conversations. Who were they following? Who were they retweeting? Who were they replying to? Were the replies formal or informal? You know, after a while I began to identify certain people in Egypt, for example, who were husbands and wives or brothers and sisters. You could just tell from the way they were conversing with each other, it was more than just a couple of activists going back and forth on them. And so what started as maybe 3 or 5 sources initially ended up becoming 30, 40, 50, just because I could see their conversations and get a sense of who they were interacting with the most. It didn't necessarily tell me everything I needed to know about those people, except that my original sources trusted them to a certain extent.
And also the role of cell phones. We cannot, have this discussion without talking about the power of cameras in Libya, in Bahrain, in Syria now. In Bahrain, the cell phones almost became like the weapons for many protesters. So what about images beyond tweets?
Twitter has been a major channel for people to send out photos and videos, or announce screens, for example. About a month ago, there's a protester in Egypt named Tarek Shalabi, and he was at a protest around the Israeli embassy, and the army started arresting people left and right. And while this was going on, he was tweeting about it, and he sent out a tweet saying, "We're surrounded," or something like that. And at that moment, he clicked a button to launch a live stream on his camera, or on his phone, which sent out an automatic tweet. So a group of us sat there online watching him get arrested. It was dark, so you couldn't really see much, but you could hear him getting yelled at by police. And then a policeman actually takes Tarek's phone, sticks it in his pocket, and you hear the rest of the arrest taking place while it's in his phone. The policeman's, his own phone rang. It was I think a Super Mario ringtone or something like that. And it was the most surreal thing because you can hear them yelling and screaming in Arabic, get on the ground, get on the ground, and it was surreal. But it confirmed that this particular activist was indeed about to be in custody.
And we saw that also in Egypt when other people were in the middle of being arrested. They were able to turn to Twitter and you would be able to share that. You know, getting back to figuring out who to follow, who's telling you the truth, the whole issue of real identity. We just saw how the Twitter community helped you unravel this mystery, this hoax that's been going on for years. Why don't you tell us about
Yes, Dan Gilmore just alluded to a moment ago this gay girl in Damascus hoax. This was a blog that became very popular in recent months. It was written in English, supposedly from a lesbian woman living in Damascus. Her character, as it turns out, was arrested about a week ago. And some of my contacts over Twitter, who were actually members of the local gay community there, started messaging me saying, this doesn't make sense, we've never heard of her. So I started asking people on Twitter, have you met her? Do you know anyone who's met her? And within a couple of hours realized that not only had anyone on Twitter met her, all the news organizations that had interviewed her had only done it through email. And so over the course of the week, with the help of the Washington Post, various bloggers around the world, we were able to piece this together. In fact, yesterday, a Taiwanese news service made a video about it. You guys could cue the YouTube video?
Gay girl in Damascus, actually Fat American in Edinburgh. Amina Araf, blogging as gay girl in Damascus, gained a loyal following with her tales of life as a lesbian in a repressive country. Fans all around the world campaigned for her release after it was reported she was abducted by Syrian police. But NPR's Carvin investigated further after Syrian sources told
Note the Twitter version.
Didn't add up. It turned out that Amina was actually a 40-year-old American guy named Carvin.
They do know this too, right?
McMaster's actions were roundly criticized by the LGBT community worldwide, including by Paula Brooks, a lesbian web editor, until it was revealed Brooks was also a straight man.
All right, you can kill the video now. So that's the weird world I live in now. You know, just by asking people questions, do you know this person? Suddenly I find myself animated in this Taiwanese daily news service. I mean, it's all downhill from here, I guess. You know, I don't know how to talk about it.
So what else should news organizations be doing? What are the lessons learned from your experience?
The lesson learned is that if you're going to try to use Twitter as a form of open source news gathering, you can't wait until the news story happens. You need to be on Twitter now, building up your credibility, building up a group of sources and people that trust you as much as you trust them. So when things suddenly happen in a particular place, as was the case with me in Tunisia, you're ready to ask people and know who the right people are for